Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Gonna go over the Murders at Karlov Manor uncommons this time, and I'm gonna go over the cards that I think are gonna be the top 10 uncommons from this set. So, let's do it. First, we got Soul Search, 6 mana, white and black spell card. Exile the first card without mana from your opponent's hand. Then, if that card's base cost is 15 or less, create a white and black spirit token. Okay, well, the reason I thought that this was an interesting card is because it gives hand removal to white, which is not something you've ever seen, I don't think. If somebody can let me know if they remember one from before, but I don't know, I don't know if it's a powerful enough effect for people to really seriously consider this in a lot of decks. I just thought it was interesting and a little bit outside the box of what you would expect from that color. So I just thought it was worth mentioning. Next, we got Hard Hitting Question. It's a 9 mana green spell card. Destroy an opposing Vanguard support. If you can't, deal 6 damage to the first opposing creature. X is equal to the base power of your first creature. So it's Vanguard removal for green, which may become more and more relevant as we go along with the upcoming standard rotation, where we will lose things like Endless Detour and other cards from standard, so you won't be able to rely on those for Vanguard removal. So this is maybe going to take the place of certain cards in standard right now. Maybe not, but Streets of New Capenna was just such a good set, and there's hardly anything in the uncommon level that will survive standard that will be nearly as powerful as that set. But we do have some options if we want to replace some of the things that we're doing in standard right now. And I also like that this green spell doesn't rely on fighting your creatures, because sometimes you can sacrifice your own creatures to destroy your opponents, but this one just takes into account your first creature's power to deal damage to another. So I think it's a decent card. I mostly like it for the Vanguard removal, but it has utility in case your opponent doesn't play one. Next, we got Case of the Shattered Pact. 8 mana, 2 shields. When this support enters the board, convert 3 gems to your Planeswalker's color. So we're getting, so it's an enchantment case. We get some utility right when we put it onto the board. Hopefully, if you're playing a monocolor walker, this will probably be more of a card you use for that. To solve, if you control cards with all colors, this card gains the solved emblem. Solved. At the beginning of the combat on your turn, target creature gains flying, double strike, and haste until end of turn. And if you don't remember, or if you didn't look at the patch notes for this upcoming update, solving just means that you hit a requirement to unlock a secondary ability that this card will have. So the cases all have varying degrees of utility when you solve them, and they all have different ways to unlock that ability. So the requirement to fulfill this one is you have to control cards with all colors. So you got to make sure that you have to have at least one card that can cover all 5 of them. So obviously the first way is going to be a 5-color card put into your deck and play that. So you might have to get a little creative to solve this case, but it's pretty powerful effect. Flying, double strike, and haste until end of turn, and you get to choose which creature gets that. So if you want to put this like on a Tainted Adversary zombie stack, then you're pretty much going to win the game, right? So there you go. Quite the steep hill to climb to make this powerful card, but it really has potential. So the next one, we got Scene of the Crime. Support card, land, clue, 6 mana, and 2 shields. At the beginning of your turn, convert 2 gems to your Planeswalker's color. When this card is destroyed, draw a card. I just thought it was a cheap way to get a little bit of conversion for those monocolor walkers. Usually, cards like this cost a little more than 6 mana. You definitely want something better so you can replace this with that, but if you're pretty new to the game and you're just struggling to get some mana into your cards, this is a decent little budget way to go with it. Here's a slight upgrade, some might argue, but this is Branch of Vitu-Ghazi, 10 mana, 3 shields, and it's also a land. At the beginning of your turn, convert 2 gems to your Planeswalker's color, then you gain 2 mana. So I like this card because not only is it giving you a chance to create some gem matches for yourself, but even if you don't succeed in that, it's going to give you 2 mana, and so it's always going to give you at least some utility. So I think that's not bad. Is it amazing? Like, you're not, it's probably not game changing for you, but sometimes you just need an extra 2 mana to cast that, Meeting of the Five or Portal to Phyrexia or whatever the heck you're trying to power up. So I think it's relevant. Fey Flight, 5 mana, spell card with flash. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains flying and hexproof. The reason I thought that this was a good card is because the hexproof appears to be permanent. And the best of us players always preach having untargeted removal for your opposing creatures because of things like this. So until everybody starts listening to us, I think hexproof is going to be relevant because a lot of people are probably still going to be playing targeted removal as their only way to do so. So if you want to give your creatures a cheap way to give them a little extra layer of protection, it's not a bad way to go. In most of my decks, if I were to put this into it, it'd probably be one of the first cards to go. But I do feel like this card, depending on the type of match you're playing, who you're playing against, putting hexproof on your creatures might make them survive longer. Crowl Whipcracker, 6 mana, 3/2 insect assassin, green and black. I think the green and black is going to be relevant. I'll tell you why. So it's an insect assassin. When this creature enters the battlefield, destroy an opposing card at random. So it's basically untargeted removal as a creature card. So there's going to be a lot of different ways to get it down. And so this can be a decent little card for mono green to give yourself a little bit of removal and untargeted removal, so you're not relying on your creatures having to do berserker damage, or your opponent plays like a Phyrexian Vindicator at just the wrong time for you. So having a way to kind of sideboard this and throw this on the battlefield when your opponent has just one card, but one nasty card, it can be pretty good. So I'm mostly including this because, black doesn't really need this kind of card, but green definitely can. So that's why I think it's a pretty relevant card. We got Case of the Pilfered Proof. 10 mana, 3 shields, support card, enchantment case. When a detective creature enters the battlefield under your control, your first creature gets +1/+1. To solve, if you control 2 or more detective creatures, this card gains a solve emblem. And then when it's solved, when a creature token enters the battlefield, create a clue token. So this card kind of reminds me of what I like about Guillaume. So this, I feel like, is kind of a budget Guillaume in a way, because you're creating basically as many tokens as possible, because there's no limit on how many you can create, and it's creating basically artifact supports out of it, which are relevant for a lot of reasons. Remember when I showed you that little red common? So if you pair that with a bunch of token generators, then you can do a lot with this card. So the only thing is they need to be detective creatures at first to solve this case. So that might be a little tricky. So there's a lot of hoops to jump through with this card, but I think that this can be something fun to build around and possibly give you some pretty interesting utility out of it. Next, we're at number 2. We got on we got unauthorized exit. 7 mana. Flash. Blue spell card. Return target creature to owner's hand. Surveil 1. The reason I like this card is for basically one reason. It has flash. So we haven't really had good flash removal or bounce in a while. You know, not counting snuff out. I feel like that's snuff out, soul partition, and that's pretty much about it. Blue hasn't had that, even though it's something that I usually see blue having in past standard situations. So seeing a little bit of flash come back to the game in this way, well, back to standard, I think is going to be pretty relevant to have because you're probably going to see a lot of nasty creatures come out with haste and all that. So, in order to not get one shotted, flash removal is very useful. So, that is why I believe this card is worth looking for. And this is the number 1 uncommon in the set for me, Deadly Complication. 8 mana, black and red spell card. Destroy the first opposing creature. Your creatures with suspect get +1/+1, then all creatures you control lose suspect. The main reason I think this is the best uncommon is because it gives red pretty cheap untargeted removal. And this is creature removal, I should say, which is something that when mono red doesn't have in standard, I am so much less interested in playing it. So this also, along with things like Molten Collapse, are really good ways to not have to rely on creature damage to destroy creatures in red, which is not something I really like to do because Rem Carolus and other prevent damage creatures are still in standard and they're still nasty, and no amount of red burn will get rid of a Phyrexian Vindicator. In fact, it will do nothing but hurt you. So this is a very good anti-Vindicator spell, which, as you should know by now, is very useful. So if for one reason to stop Phyrexian Vindicator, this is a really good card to have. And then the thing about Suspect, I believe that a lot of times you don't want your creatures to have Suspect, so that's something interesting. So the only thing I'm wondering is, will this card autocast if your creatures if any of your creatures have Suspect on it? I think it will. So that's the only thing I think you need to look out for. But very good card. I'm definitely gonna want to be using this one when I get it in my hands. So okay. What do you think of this list? Were there some uncommons that you saw? I mean, there were a lot of them. There were actually, it was took me a bit of going through to pare my list down to only 10. I was actually pretty impressed with the amount of playable uncommons. There were ones that I thought were fun and but not necessarily that powerful, so I didn't include them in this list. So I tried to go for the ones that I thought would be both fun and also potentially very powerful. Okay, follow along to the rares next.